Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoterica and our continuing series on the MiSTer FPGA DE-10 Nano board project. And today we're continuing our comparison series. We're going to take a look at Capcom CPS games on both MiSTer as well as Final Burn Neo, because these are some of the best arcade games of all time. We've already done the CPS 2 at this point in time, so we should check out the original. Before we get too far involved, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like, subscribe, and that notification bell definitely helps us out. If you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But taking a look right here, right now at Captain Commando, I'm not going to quiz you guys on which source is which. This is Final Burn Neo. They're incredibly close. Both MiSTer, the CPS cores from Jotego, as well as the Final Burn Neo project. Gameplay-wise, there's absolutely no difference whatsoever. The difference between a MiSTer and Final Burn Neo comes down to sound and visual quality, in my opinion. Now we moved over to the MiSTer source, and it can be quite difficult to tell what you're looking at. I will put some side-by-side comparisons up in just a little bit. What I would say off the top is I like both of these options, and it's going to be 100% subjective which one you like. I would say that the MiSTer core, the audio is more appealing to my ear. Now, I'm not an audiophile, but it sounds a little bit more like what I remember the Capcom CPS sounding like, and I do have some original CPS boards in my closet, and they remind me more of what I hear on my Supergun when I play. Moving back over to Final Burn Neo, what you're going to notice as well is the colors shift, and they become a little less vibrant. If you look at the red in the chairs on MiSTer now that we moved back over, I just like what it's doing with the colors more, because Captain Commando does have a lot of pastels in it, but it also has a lot of very punchy colors, and I would say compared to the original board, I feel like the color profile of MiSTer is ever so slightly closer. But now let's do a side-by-side comparison, because I love locking frame to frame to see if everything's executing code-wise at the same rate when you're not in control. And while you do see some visual discrepancies between both, Strider hits the ground at the exact same time, and as we move forward, the words go disappear at the exact same time. So as far as how MiSTer versus Final Burn Neo is executing the game, it is frame to frame accurate across both sources, and that's a really good thing. But you'll see here, the green in the background on Strider, the red in the foreground, is just greener and redder than it is on Final Burn Neo on the right. And that is to my preference. You may have a completely different opinion as to what you think looks correct, but the nice thing is these two sources are so close that we're just down to talking about visual comparisons, because we don't have anything to point at either the FPGA core from Jotego or Final Burn Neo to say one is less accurate than the other. Now moving on to another game I absolutely love is Puelinckx. It's just one of my favorite run and gun games of all time. If you've never played it, I definitely recommend you check it out. What I want to do is put them side by side, because in this comparison, you're really going to start to see the difference between what the color saturation and color profile looks like from MiSTer to the Final Burn Neo emulator. MiSTer's on the left, Final Burn Neo's on the right. You'll see all that foliage in the jungle's greener, it has a little bit more shade, the contrast between shadow and lightness is a little bit more deeper, where on the right with Final Burn Neo, it's ever so slightly not as saturated. Now like I said, this is just subjective. You can decide which one looks better to you. To me, to my eye, to having played these games on arcade boards, I feel like MiSTer's doing a slightly better job, like 5%, of replicating what I think the color is supposed to look like. And that is what I mean when I say that's the great thing about this comparison, is that if all we're talking about is slight variations in color and sound, that means either one is an awesome option for you to play. And you'll see that I'm so used to these games, I finished about 5 seconds apart on that stage. But again, moving into the second stage, this little European town, you're going to see the bricks are a little more orange, the shadows are a little bit darker. It just has an overall sense of depth on the MiSTer as far as the video is concerned that I feel like Final Burn Neo is slightly lacking, and I'm sure we could tweak the colors to get them extremely close. But in the sound department, they do sound slightly different. So go ahead and listen really quick to the MiSTer versus Final Burn Neo, and I'll come back and talk more about the comparison. But enjoy! Now, if you couldn't tell, go back and listen to it again. On the Final Burn Neo, the audio seems to be off balance, and it's not that we're missing some sound effects, it's that they're actually getting drowned out, which is really unfortunate because I love the sound and soundtrack in 1941, and it's a little bit of a bummer that Final Burn Neo just seems to be bumping all the audio up to the point where things are getting a little bit unbalanced, and that's my biggest critique of Final Burn Neo across this entire comparison compared to MiSTer is that audio quality. But now again, in Magic Sword, moving back over to MiSTer, the greens are greener, the darks are darker, those rocks have a little bit more definition in them. I am giving the edge to MiSTer compared to Final Burn Neo as far as the CPS is concerned for my preference. Now, gameplay wise, they are identical. Everything plays the same. If there's any more lag on Final Burn Neo, I'm not detecting it on my system, but of course this is a computer, so depending on your specs that may change for you. But the great thing is, gameplay wise, you can decide how you want to play your Capcom CPS games. Now, I will say Final Burn Neo requires a specific ROM set, and it can be a little bit trickier to get those ROMs. It's not hard if you're used to it, it should be fine, but it's not just using the, update all script on MiSTer. And again, moving into the second level of Magic Sword, you're going to see here, just look at the purples, look at those reds, kind of look at that vibrancy and the tonal shift between where it's supposed to be dark and where it's supposed to be light in the background with those little window areas. And as we quickly move over to MiSTer in just a second, train your eye on that spot and you're going to see that it just gets a little bit more dramatic. That gradient really does drop off to shadow. Those reds and purples are a little bit richer, and that's what I really love to see in these games because the colors are incredible. But let's take a look at Daimakimura or Ghouls and Ghosts, and you'll see this comparison gets closer. It feels like MiSTer with the reds and the purples, kind of that warmer color profile, looks slightly better to my eye, but when we get into the greens, it is a close match. You'll just see that some of that earth there is just a little bit browner, looks a little bit more like dirt compared to on the right with Final Burn Neo. And of course, having played Daimakimura so many times, I'm even pretty closely matched on screen in this example. But the best part is that MiSTer and Final Burn Neo are both giving us an excellent option as to how to play these games. If you're going to buy a MiSTer just to play Capcom CPS games, I would probably recommend you don't do that. Now, MiSTer is great for a lot of things that Final Burn Neo can't cover, but if you were thinking, I want a MiSTer so I can play Capcom CPS games, I would probably recommend against it actually, which is not in any way, shape, or form a dig against MiSTer because I think it is doing the better job as far as the CPS platform is concerned. I just think Final Burn Neo is so close to MiSTer that it wouldn't be worth dropping the money if you just had one use case scenario for the MiSTer device. But that's the great thing about MiSTer is that it isn't just a Capcom CPS machine, it's also like basically 100 different machines at once, and that's why I absolutely love it. But yeah, that's the Capcom CPS comparison between MiSTer versus Final Burn Neo. They are extremely close, but I do give the edge to MiSTer just because of the visual quality as far as the color saturation is concerned, and more specifically the audio. I just think that Final Burn Neo's blowing out some of the channels of audio on CPS games. Short of that, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like, subscribe, that notification bell definitely helps us out, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.